Hello, hello, hello. This is Gresh from the I Am CEO podcast, and I have a very special guest on the show today. I have Dr. Matt Pace. Dr. Matt, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Gresh. Great to be here.
Absolutely. Super excited to have you on and talk about all the awesome things that you're doing. Of course, before we do that, I want to read a little bit more about Dr. Matt so you can hear about some of those awesome things. And Dr. Matt is Senior Vice President of Leadership Insights at global leadership company DDI. And having advised thousands of CEOs, senior teams, boards, and C suite executives in more than 20 countries across the world, is a recognized author, CEO coach, C suite consultant, keynote speaker, and pioneer of many of today's leading approaches for helping leaders succeed at the top. He's the lead author of Leaders Ready Now, Accelerating Growth in a Faster World, which he wrote in 2016, and co-author of its award-winning predecessor, Grow Your Own Leaders in 2002, which have shaped over 2 decades of impact in growing leaders into skilled, self-aware, compassionate, enterprising executives. Dr. Matt is sought after for his expertise in CEO succession and onboarding, senior team effectiveness, board effectiveness, and executive succession and development. And one of the things that I was super excited about when I got a chance to read a little bit more about Matt is that he said he was a passionate believer that humans have limitless potential, which it really stuck with me because I think so many times we can get in our own way, but if we start to realize that phenomenal things happen. And one of the videos I was listening to is he said that accelerated learning generates energy. And I think that so many times when we think about, as he said in the video, going back and think about what was our best experience in learning something new, what that experience was like, he starts to kind of reshape the way that we look at those things. So, Dr. Matt, super excited to have you on the show. Are you ready to speak to the IMCO community?
I am ready, Gresh. It's a privilege to be here. I know you've had so many talented, influential, and experienced people on, and it's a real privilege to be among them.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been truly blessed to have so many valuable people that are doing phenomenal things, and I'm glad it doesn't stop with you. It starts and it probably even accelerates a little bit more. So, super excited to have you on the show. Are you wanting to rewind the clock a little bit so we can hear a little bit more on how you got started? What started with all your awesome work that you're doing?
Yeah, happy to. You want me to start there?
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, Gresh, I thought I was going to be a clinical psychologist when I was growing up. Even almost back to grade school, I thought that's what I was going to do. I went to college and I went to a mental health clinic to do an internship and worked under some really talented clinicians and learned that it takes a special set of skills to be in healthcare and a set of skills that I don't know that I have, and that I certainly at the time didn't feel prepared to access. So there I was, not headed for clinical psychology, but I found my way into organizational psychology, or IO psychology, as we like to call it, and then found my way into a leadership company here at DDI, and then all the way back to psychology again, but doing a professional version of what I originally thought I was going to do in a healthcare environment. So I don't do therapy. We don't do that sort of thing at DDI. We're behavioral scientists, and we help people find the best versions of their own behavioral signatures in their jobs, in their companies, in the C suites, in the boardrooms. And somehow I made my way sort of back to where I started, but I guess through a different doorway.
Yeah, I absolutely love that because I think so many times I love the analogy of doorways because we sometimes think there's only one way to get into the house, one way to get into our path of where we want to be. But sometimes if we have, and which I imagine you have a lot of experience with this, looking at things in a different perspective, we start to see that there is another way, maybe multiple ways, and we can start to find the thing that I think is probably true to us.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. So I wanted to drill down a little bit, hear a little bit more on like how that process goes, how you're making that impact, how are you making this, I guess, dent for these organizations so that they can have impactful leaders.
Well, I mentioned that DDI is a behavioral science company.
Mhm.
And when we talk about behavioral science, we mean the science of what we can observe, what we can watch you do, not what we think you might do, or what
Mhm.
we think you believe, or what we think is inside of who you are. Sometimes it matters to think about those things, but we've made our business focused on being able to watch leaders. being able to watch them do things. And so we build learning programs and assessment programs and development programs that focus on watching how it happens. So you might, if you were going to learn how to coach somebody, you might start by watching someone on a video in a positive model, but then you get to try it yourself and somebody else watches you, or we let you take a video of yourself and you watch yourself being in a coaching situation. And so those observations produce a behavioral signature, because no two people are alike in their DNA. And guess what? No two people are alike in the way they behave, in the way they react. And so when you see your own behavioral signature exposed to yourself, then it gives you a choice. What do I want to do with that? Because behavior is a choice. You decide what you want to do every day, how you want to show up, where you want to be, where you don't want to be. And what we found is that the science of those observations are information that we can all use to figure out how we want to grow.
That's extremely powerful, and I imagine exciting as well too. Because I think so many times when we go through, life, let alone in our business and organizations, I imagine there's probably really ingrained, for lack of a better term, habits or behaviors, that we do on a regular basis. That I imagine it's probably hard to kind of find that other door, as we were talking about before. But I think by having somebody's, have that insight and be able to say and shine a light on those behaviors, those habits, it gives us that opportunity, but also probably awareness to other options that we might have in the things that we do.
Sometimes in such simple ways, also, Gresh, the simplest things like when you start a meeting with one of your members of your team, start with a question rather than an expectation or a statement. Or when you get named the leader of a team, be the last one to comment on a presentation, not the first one to comment on a presentation. Some of these habits are so simple that almost you know too simple if you think about it. I never realized I did that, or I didn't know I was talking first all the time. Yeah, you're right, I forgot to ask questions. And such simple little things that when you notice them, or when someone organizes them for you in a way that you haven't seen before, it can spark new insight that it doesn't just land one time, it finally sticks. Oh, I remember when I got told to ask more questions, and I learned that, and I've always done it since.
Right.
That sort of thing.
Yeah, it's so funny that you said that because I almost feel like the people that end up becoming those leaders, they had certain habits or things that they did. They were like, okay, I always have to make sure I ask a question. I always have to make sure I'm the first one to say something. But when you're in leadership, and I imagine you're trying to empower the others around you, you have to kind of, I don't know if the right word is let go, or like right phrase is let go of who you were so that you can empower others. But it start to probably have to approach things in a different way. But we sometimes don't realize the things that we're doing.
Well said. Totally agree.
Yeah, absolutely. So, could you drill down a little bit more and take us through like what that looks like for teams? Like, when do they sometimes realize that they need to have those conversations? They need to maybe have a little bit more of the insight and pay attention to those behaviors. Is there like an inflection point where that occurs?
Yeah. There's one thing that comes up a lot these days, Gresh, and I don't think I'll surprise you with this. It's with one word, and you probably hear it a lot. It's trust.
Mhm.
Trust is something that people have a hard time finding in the world. It doesn't exist in a lot of the places where they used to think it existed, like government or the media. People don't trust large institutions like they used to. They trust businesses more than almost any other institution nowadays.
Mhm.
But the data on trust, we gather a lot of data at DDI, and we can say that a disappointing number of associates in companies trust management to do what's right. About 46% of employees trust their manager to do what's right. It gets worse when you ask about senior management. Only about 32% trust senior management to do what's right. These are disappointing numbers, but here's you ask the question, what do what triggers people to want to do something different. Because if leaders show a little bit of vulnerability, their employees are 5.3 times more likely to trust them to do what's right. If they take it a little bit further and they are willing to disclose their shortcomings or talk about what they're maybe not so good at or what they don't know or what they're uncertain about, if they take it a little bit further, the numbers go up to like 7.5% more likely to have people trust them. So you can adjust these things with very simple little things. A little bit of vulnerability can dial the trust meter up significantly in organizations. And once a new leader gets a job, for example, they're running a new team and they know that their whole team's watching them. They're not sure if they've got this yet. They want to build trust. Vulnerability is one of those things that doesn't occur to people as something they should start with.
Mm.
I'm supposed to know the answers. I'm supposed to be the one who's providing the leadership. Means I say things, I do things, I make decisions, I make the call. So being vulnerable is counterintuitive. But in fact, in cultivating one of the most important things you can cultivate as a leader, which is trust, it's one of the most important things you can do.
Yeah, and it seems so powerful. I often say like we forget about the human aspect of business, the human aspect of life, and I love that part because I think when we start to realize or even maybe bring light to the human part of us, and a lot of times that is the quote unquote imperfections of the things that we don't always do right or the things we might be scared or nervous or whatever those human emotions are, we start to communicate those things. It actually seems like it becomes a lot more of a magnet to attract us and develop more of that trust and appreciation. And I imagine everything flows from there. The culture, the performance, the goal, all those things happen because you have kind of revealed or maybe put light on that human part.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's often just a pivot for people when they get into leadership positions. And so because we focus on behavior, we have a lot of conversations about what can you do? What would that look like? And sometimes people might kind of mentally understand the concept of vulnerability, but show me what that would look like. And it's not always easy to make that leap between I get it in my mind, but now what do I do? What do I
Right.
say? When do I say it?
Yeah, and that's so powerful because it's so funny you were saying that because I think so many times we might, look at or hear different philosophies or ways that we should approach our leadership, but sometimes it's like, okay, that sounds really good, but how do I actually implement that into my day to day? How do I make sure that I'm being a better leader? I'm reaching more goals. I'm building better trust. All of those things. But it sounds like you all are able to have those conversations. Of course, be able to look at those behaviors, but still be able to provide that actionable like guide to how leaders can make more of an impact within organizations.
There's data on that as well,
Hmm.
Gresh. There's an interesting trend that goes about over the last decade. If you went back a decade ago and you asked companies, how strong is your leadership bench?
Hmm.
The people who might move up. Uh, do you have people who can move into leadership positions? And a decade ago, about 18% of companies, only 18% said, we have a pretty strong bench. And that's, less than 1 in 5.
Yeah.
But now move forward, it's actually about 12 years ago, more than a decade. As of last year, that number is down to 12%,
Wow.
meaning companies are having more and more trouble cultivating the right leadership behaviors, building them and generating them. But here's the thing, among those 12%, because you were making a comment about building stronger behavior.
Right.
Among those 12%, they have about they're 6 times more likely to have strong leadership as evaluated by their own employees. They're about 5 times more likely to be able to retain and engage their top talent.
Hmm.
They're about 5 times more likely to be able to prevent burnout.
Hmm.
They're about 3 times more likely to be the strongest financial performers in in their sector. So you can make big changes in leadership. And
Hmm.
we have the privilege of being able to watch it. And you can change it by showing people these simple ways of changing their behavior. Ask more questions, lead with inquiry. Don't just tell people what to do, ask them for their input, build ideas with people. These are simple techniques that you can package in really small learning moments so that when leaders get into jobs that they that get bigger than they expect, or they get into a period of their job that's more complicated than they saw coming. The question is, how can you be there in that moment when a leader needs that insight? And what we find is that when you give people just a little bit of access to the right kinds of content, they use it when they need it, and sure enough, it dials up the organization's ability to be more ready with a stronger bench. It's a little bit of a long-winded answer to your question, but you were starting in on, how do you move teams forward? How do you generate those behaviors? And the answer is it's much simpler and happens much faster. But so many organizations have gotten so busy and overwhelmed, and they're facing so much chaos and so many challenges that it can be hard to sort of restore focus on something like learning new behaviors. But those that do, the 12%, they have these massive gains that are there for anyone else to grab whenever they decide to.
Yeah, and I appreciate you breaking that down so well because I think one of my absolute favorite books is the one thing, and the whole idea of it is what's the one thing that by doing it everything else is easier and necessary. And when you were explaining that, I literally saw that as the one thing, or at least one of the highest priority things that leaders need to do because it creates kind of like that watershed effect or waterfall moment where
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
drop a rock in the water and it ripples everywhere. So it ripples and it affects so many other people. So by making sure that you're creating that culture and you're maybe prioritizing that for leaders, it starts to create a better culture for the entire organization, which leads to all the benefits that you talked about. But I think while leaders are trying to figure out, should I work on this? Should I work on that? Should I, all these things that are happening, sometimes it's like you said, it's the quote unquote simple or things that are right in front of our face that we're not realizing makes such a huge impact.
More often than not, the complicated solution, Gresh, you and I both know the complicated solution is usually not the one that's going to pay off.
Hmm.
It's the one that's simple. You may have had an idea about it already, but maybe it just wasn't quite clear enough, or I needed a better context for it or something. But you're right. The simple is usually the most actionable.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, people can, execute that and they're able to even understand it, which I think is probably one of the deeper things that you want across an entire
Yeah,
organization. So, what
right.
would you consider to be what I like to call your secret sauce? This could be for yourself, the organization, or a combination of both. But what do you feel kind of sets you apart and makes you unique?
Secret sauce. Secret means not everybody recognizes it. And I might answer this one with something that, I think you could answer this question at any level of leadership, but I'm going to answer it in the C-suite because it I think it's the easiest to explain. And it goes like this: when you get a job on the senior team, the CEO is your boss now. Uh, the thing that I ask most often is for people to stop thinking of the CEO as their boss.
Mm.
And and it's not uncommon for people to look at me like, "What? What do you mean? What do you mean the CEO is not my boss?" And what I don't mean is that literally. Of course, yes, the CEO is your boss, and you're going to need to have a good relationship with your boss, and we all know to do what our boss expects. But when you get to the C-suite, and now you're a chief financial officer, you're a chief marketing officer, you're running operations, human resources, etc., you are the chief of that function. You might have a business unit. You might have a global region. You are the head of a critical arm of capability for the company, and probably you're more professionally capable than your CEO. You may be
Mm-hmm.
more deeply trained and developed. And so your job is to think beyond your CEO. So who's your boss if it's not your CEO? It's your customers,
Mm-hmm.
it's your shareholders. What do they need your function to be doing? And that doesn't mean that's the only thing you think about, but as a starting point for how to be the most effective leader you can be for your CEO, for your board of directors, thinking through the lens of who's being affected by the work that I create every day. That is the way a lot of senior leaders have to evolve their thinking when they get into the C suite. But this could also be applied to a first line supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
So you take a job as a first line supervisor and you're getting used to things like scheduling time for other people, giving people new accountabilities, asking them to do things that they don't feel like they have time to do, steering performance in new ways that are new to you. What's the best way to think about doing that? It's to think, who are the customers of my team's work? And your boss is, of course, going to be one key person to help you sort that out. But you can look around your organization and think, who are the recipients of my team's work? Let me think about what those people need and use that to ask my boss questions, use that to ask my team questions. And so it's thinking beyond where your direct responsibilities may guide you so that you can expand your mindset.
Yeah, and it's so huge. I love that you mentioned that because I think again we can get so caught in the okay, this is my duty, these are my duties, these are the things I'm supposed to do on a daily basis, and realizing as you said so well, like those people, especially in the C-suite, but really in any position, you have certain responsibilities, but that responsibility kind of goes beyond the things that are in the job duties. It's about being an expert at your craft and the thing that you do. So, in doing that, being able to kind of translate that into how you're serving the stakeholders, like you mentioned, if it's the investors or it's the board or it's the customers or client, whatever it is, you start to realize that you can translate the work that you do on a regular basis to be able to help serve them better. And I feel like that probably also creates a lot more creativity, a lot more innovation as well too, because you are the expert at what it is that you do. You start to think outside of the box and start to create different ideas, different opportunities, and really phenomenal things I imagine can happen for organizations from there.
Gresh, it's a great way to think about inclusion as well, because none of us is enough to be able to solve all the things that are in front of us. And we know that groups of people who have very different backgrounds, different ideas, different education, different experiences, they solve problems faster and better than other groups and teams of people. And leaders who are helping those groups anchor on, why are we doing this? We're not just doing this because the boss said to do this. We're doing this for a reason that links to why our company exists. And if we together as a team can begin to think about that, we're going to need each other's ideas. We're going to need each other's effort and input, and we're all going to grow, and we're going to be able to sort of get out in front of the really specific demands that are in front of us and exact a little bit more control over our world, because we'll be, we might be creating some noise once in a while. We might be putting some pressure on our own leadership once in a while. But guess what? The best leaders want that pressure. They want that tension. And so as we watch organizations wrestle with their own behaviors, now back to how do the behaviors get simple? Sometimes this means asking questions of people from other teams that maybe I'm not responsible for, or they're not directly in my day to day, but I can see that if we can work together a little bit better, we can probably create a better outcome. And so leaders, as you go up the ladder, want that. They see it, they want it. How do you make it happen? Well, if we begin to expand and include a wider set of ideas, people, backgrounds in the way we lead our teams, we find our way to better leaders for a better future, as we say at DDI.
Yeah, I love that. And there's a book called Range that it reminds me so much of because it talks a lot around the problems of tomorrow need a range of different experiences, backgrounds, like all those things. And it goes through like different stories and case studies of athletes and people that didn't just do one thing to be able to get to where they are, but they had and leaned on the different experiences, and those experiences actually end up being like their secret sauce, their superpowers, because it allowed them to solve the more complex issues that are happening today, where they weren't just saying, okay, we're just going to solve this for one group of people or one segment. When you have those inclusive thoughts, those range of thoughts and perspectives, and you are able to think about things in a different and unique way and come up with new solutions to problems that sometimes we didn't even know existed.
I love that. I love the concept of range, in terms of range of experiences,
Hmm.
range of challenges, create more diversity in my experience,
Right.
so my mind is ready for a new challenge, right?
Yeah, and especially how things are changing so rapidly, in all organizations to stay in industries, it's so important to have it. So I love that, that awareness that you all have, and of course that you're presenting to, these teams so that they can also do that and run with that from there. Perfect, perfect, perfect. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit, and I want to ask you for what I call a CEO hack. So this could be like an app, a book, or even a habit that you have, but what's something that you feel like makes you more effective and efficient?
Um, you know, I think it would be, how do I frame this in the best way? Learning strengthens helping.
Mhm.
If you show up and you want to be helpful, if you show up and you want to contribute, if you show up and you want to give something, all of those efforts are going to be strengthened if you bring learning, your intent to learn, to the situation. And I have thought about that a lot. I think I would include myself in this, and maybe for a lot of us, trying to when we're trying to be effective, when we're trying to find a way to contribute, when we're trying to have more impact, I think we're often challenging ourselves, and rightly so, to give something, to teach something, to show something. I want to leave my mark. I want to make a difference. I want to have impact. And it doesn't always occur to us that what we what we learn, what we spend the time learning, can often have as much impact as what we spend the time giving.
Mhm.
And and if I could just maybe translate that a little bit more, imagine that someone hires you, Gresh, to go help their team. And you walk in from the outside, and you show up in their conference room or on their Zoom call, and you start listening to the way this team this team operates, and they hired you. They want Gresh's insight and your wisdom. And so you're feeling pressure to give that to them, right?
Right.
And I think, if I were to convey one hack, it's that the time you spend showing them, demonstrating to them that you're learning about them, is going to enable them to use whatever it is that you give them.
Hmm.
If that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes so much sense because I feel like we all I listened, I went to the networking event and they always said that everybody's listening to the same station, WIIFM, what's in it for me. And I imagine that the
Yeah.
people, if I'm walking in the room on the other end, they're trying to figure out how is this going to help me to solve my problems. And I think as the person that's walking in, the more you learn about them, the more you pay attention, have that empathy, have that awareness to not just maybe what they're saying, but maybe what they're feeling, all those human aspects we kind of talked about. I imagine it's only going to arm you with the opportunity to be able to make a bigger impact, to be able to create a better solution, and be able to meet them exactly where they are so that you can help them get to ultimately where they want to be.
A different way of saying it, Gresh,
Hmm.
is that it it's more difficult to help individuals and teams if they don't feel seen.
Mm.
And once someone knows you see them, now you've just graduated to the next level of having the ability to help them. So I might have all the best intent in the world to help you, and you might be willing for me to help you. But then when you know that I see you, it's different, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's just a little bit more of an invitation. There's more safety. There's more latitude to be vulnerable. And maybe we can be vulnerable together now and admit what we don't know, or say, gee, Gresh, that's too complicated for me. Can you explain that again? You know, that's a little tiny way of being vulnerable. And so if you can demonstrate that you're learning about someone else, about their team, about their situation, you have a better chance to help.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I also feel like, and I don't know if you've seen this in the same context, where as you start to kind of sharpen your saw in whatever is your superpower, your secret sauce, the industry, whatever your thing is, you also start to realize that you're not just doing that to kind of check off a box or learn more things. You're doing it so that you're able to serve better, so that you're able to be in those rooms and actually be present. It sounds like that also, of course, works out when you're having those conversations, but also when you're quote unquote rolling up your sleeves to be better at your craft as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's extremely powerful. I love that. So, what would you consider to be a little bit more of a CEO nugget? This might be something you touched on. It could be like a word of wisdom or piece of advice you might give to your favorite client, or if you happen to a time machine, you might tell your younger business self.
Um, well, I think the thing I would tell my younger self is the thing about learning.
There you go.
That one I just said. But a nugget for CEOs. The first part of what you said um, is something that one of the things I do a lot of is coach CEOs, and often they're brand new, their first CEO assignment.
Mhm,
And if there's one thing that I've learned, I guess it's two things that I've learned that
mhm,
every CEO has to have, that are very clear as a CEO. The first one is a reason, and the second one is a mirror.
mhm,
And what I mean by that is that when you first, the reason, which is why do I want to do this? What's my reason for wanting this job? Not why do I think I deserve it, but why do I want to do it? What's my personal reason for wanting to be here? Because if you don't know that, it's going to be difficult for you to maintain the conviction that you'll need to stand in a sturdy way around the things that you know are necessary to get done.
mhm,
And that reason has to be human. It has to support the organization. It doesn't have to be world hunger, but it has to be something that is generally good for people,
right.
and so if you can start with a reason that, hey, this is why I'm here. We're trying to accomplish this. We're trying to move forward on this thing, and that's why I'm here. The next thing you have to be able to do is have a completely unblemished, crystal clear mirror to look at the true version of who you are. Because
Mhm,
if you're not prepared to build your own self insight, the world is going to give it to you.
mhm,
And it might not be as easy to digest when you get it. And so being the most authentic version of who you are is the way to be the best CEO that you are. I mean, there are dozens, probably hundreds of books about what CEOs do and how they're supposed to do it.
mhm,
We don't need new information about what is the CEO job and how do they do this, because that's not what people struggle to figure out. What they struggle to figure out is, how should I do this? Who am I? And the best, because the job is so all consuming, and it's not just CEO, it's every leadership job that wrings people out and makes them exhausted at the end of the day, and they just can't wait to get home and turn Netflix on or
mhm,
something like that. So when you can be yourself, you sustain your energy, you can stay more connected to your reason, but you have to bring courage and you have to bring honesty and you have to let that be something that evolves because every big challenge in life is going to expose new dimensions of who we are. And sometimes we're going to be proud of them. And sometimes we're going to wish we could do it over again because we didn't like the way we did it. And that's life. And if you are prepared to be honest with that and you can look in the mirror and say, yeah, that's me. I'm not good at that. But I can get help or I can try harder next time or, I can accept that and move on and keep working at my reason. Those are the best CEOs, the ones with a great reason and a crystal clear mirror that they use. And often those two things are the starting place with new CEOs and not just CEOs but leaders who are trying to make their way into a more challenging situation.
Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing that to light, and of course having those conversations because I think I imagine like you have those conversations with these CEOs or these leadership in those teams as well too, and it's probably not something you can necessarily find in a book, or it's probably like that internal work or even that back and forth conversation or a lot of I imagine questions that you're asked that bring those things out. But I feel like if you don't do that, then it like you said so well, it starts to really become more of a challenge to lead, not necessarily in the peaks, but in the valleys, I imagine, when things aren't going necessarily your way, or maybe you feel like things are going the right way, but maybe the team does all those things. I imagine being able to have those conversations with people like you help out so much in terms of like probably staying focused, but also maybe understanding exactly what's going on and how that's happening.
Well said, Gresh. And I would add additionally that you can use some rigor to you on the mirror
Mhm.
piece. You can use some rigor. You can gather data about yourself. And we do a lot of this. We conduct assessments,
Mhm.
and sometimes those are experiential assessments where we show you your behavior. And you can learn about things like your personality, your motivations, your thinking style. And these are things that are unique to people that um, are always, if they're a characteristic of you, if it's part of your nature, it's good. It's acceptable. It's good. It's meant to be in the world. If it's
Mhm.
part of who you are, and then if you can accept that, and someone can help you with some good instrumentation and some good assessments, improve your relationship with yourself in a work situation. Now all of a sudden things start to come together in a way where you say, not just I know who I am and I know who I want to be, but I know who I am and I know who I want to be in this leadership job.
Mhm.
And I got some simple ways to remind myself what I'm good at, to be careful about the stuff that might trip me up every now and to be someone who brings my team along and is open. And I could keep going, but the idea of using the mirror is something that leaders can apply some measurement to. They can get more precise about it, and and knowing a few basics, even if it's not exactly the way you think of yourself. It's not to like find out a new truth about Gresh. It's really to give you a way to think about it that adds to what the way you think about it, so
Mhm.
that inside you're always learning about yourself and outside you're always learning about your environment. Back to this thing about learning is probably better than knowing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it ends up being so powerful because the more you kind of learn about yourself, the more you see, how you fit within the world, the organization, and all of those things. And I think it just empowers you a lot more because you start to realize that, hey, this is what I do, this is what I do best, this is how I'm able to kind of be or live within this organization. But at the same time, you start to realize like how can we find people to I just see so many phenomenal things that kind of come from there
Yeah.
when you start to have that awareness of self and the totality and that measurement and the preciseness that you talked about.
Gresh, one of the things we talk about with leaders all the time is No matter where you go, no matter what your leadership job is, no matter what you're leading or what the challenges are, you get to be you. And guess what? There's a great leader in that. And if you can find that, if you get to be you and you get to be a great leader, bang, then you got it. That's the answer.
There you go. But we got to make sure we roll up our sleeves and do that work. So that's why I love all the things that you're doing. And what's the saying? Be yourself. Everybody else is already taken.
There it
So
is.
you got to
That's
know who
it.
our self is, though, which
Love it.
is what I love what you do. So I know you've had phenomenal conversations with other CEOs and all of those. So I want to ask you my absolute favorite question, which is the definition of what it means to be a CEO. So our goal is to have different quote unquote CEOs on the show. So Dr. Matt, what does being a CEO mean to you?
I think I have to build on the last answer and say that being a CEO means being the most true and authentic version of who you are as a leader. It's not the template of a leader. It's not following a recipe. It's not doing what somebody else did. It is courageously looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, this is the best version of what I can be. And that requires being totally open to where you need help and where
Mhm.
you need input. And the people who feel as though they don't need help or that they probably have a better answer than most other people are the ones who are most at risk and the most in danger. Uh, One of the things that Gresh, I've often said to CEOs as well, that surprises them is I say, you're probably going to be more effective if you work to reduce your power and increase the power of the members of your senior team and the leaders who surround you. That doesn't mean reduce your power to something meaningless, but build other people up, create larger expectations for other people, create more of a platform for people to do things that will surprise you. And I think CEOs are the best ones, are the ones who can be themselves and they can find a way to help other people be themselves. And
Mhm.
there it is.
Nice. I definitely appreciate that definition. I always say, if you run your own race, you can't lose. And I think so many times we're looking into other people's races, seeing what they're doing. But if you stay true to yours, not only does it allow you to run better, more impactfully, also when you start to look over or people are looking at you, you start to realize that empowers them as well to run their race, find out who they are, how they can excel the most. So truly appreciate that definition. Of course, appreciate you doing that with so many clients
Thank
as
you.
well.
Thank you, Gresh.
Absolutely. And so, of course, I appreciate your time too. So, wanted to pass you the mic, so to speak, just to see if there's anything additional you want to let our readers and listeners know. And of course, how best they can get a hold of you, find about all the awesome things that you're working on, and you can help support them doing.
Thanks for that. I think the only thing I would say is that leadership is something that we watch as an organization every day. We gather data on it, and we're scientists. And the science of creating leadership capability gets results. And when companies use a few basic principles to do it, they're about 3.5 times more likely to be known as a great place to work. And and it's not that hard. It doesn't take that long. There's a few basic things. And if you're trying to differentiate yourself from your competition, or if you're trying to find a way to make your organization attractive to the leaders and the professionals out in the field who are the best and the brightest, if I could give you one lever to pull, I would say pull the lever that creates learning for people in your organization because it's like a good infection. It infects people with more openness. It infects them with faster problem solving. It affects them with more of a sense of competition and we're winning and speed and progress, which is all the things that people are telling us they're hungry for today. And so, thanks for the opportunity to leave that last thing. Not everyone asks that question, and from where we sit at DDI as these sort of geeky behavioral scientists, we see this massive opportunity that some organizations get, and they're performing way better than other organizations, but that so many other organizations have yet to discover. So
Yeah.
thanks for that.
Yeah, absolutely appreciate that. And people that want to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I'm sorry, if they want to
Get a hold of you and reach
if they
out?
want to get a hold of me, you can find me on ddiworld.com, and you will find my name, and which of course they can see on all the headers on this podcast. But yes, ddiworld.com, and you'll find more about the data that I've been sharing, the services that we provide. Thank you, Gresh.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, we're going to have the links and information in the show notes as well, too, just like Dr. Mac mentioned. But I truly appreciate, that last thought and kind of everything that you're doing because it all is on that foundation of learning and how impactful that is. I think so many times we don't realize like those foundational elements and how that helps us to build, a stronger house, stronger organization, just all of those things. But I really love how those things are in tune with that human part of business. The more we learn, the more it starts to impact us as human beings. We can be better and pack better and do so many phenomenal things. So thank you so much for reminding us of how to do that. And of course, empowering so many organizations like you do. And I hope you have a phenomenal rest of the day.
Thank you, Gresh. It's obvious that you've been a student of a lot of this yourself because you're bringing a lot of insights of your own. And I learned a lot from you today as well. So thanks for that.